So are the Flyers. And you're listening to You Would Think, the Philadelphia Flyers podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Collington, and joining me once again, Kevin Durso. How are you, buddy?
I'm doing well.
Oh, you're doing well. I'm doing well. The Flyers are doing well. It is good times on Broad Street. The dad's trip, the vibes were high. The Flyers won 2 out of 3 this week, getting points in all 3. 5 out of a maximum 6. Kevin, I asked you something on last week's show, and I'm gonna do a version of it again. Are the Flyers for real? Like, it's another week. It's 3 more solid performances. Okay, we're diving right into it. Before we do that, follow us on social media at YWT Podcast. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Okay, diving right in. Kevin's at Kevin_Durso. Okay, go.
So I'm going to follow the same, or try to follow the same thing that I kind of went off of last week to an extent. But I'm trying to pull up, if I can find it anyway. I'm struggling for a minute to find it on social because social's being wonderful this morning. But I'll paraphrase it because I remember seeing it at least. So I'll go off of this. Kevin Kurz, who covers the Flyers for The Athletic, tweeted something out after the game that was along the lines of, now that this is 30 games in, it goes from being, oh, that's a surprisingly good start to they're just good.
This is just who they are.
Right. And the win that they just had on Saturday night teeters toward the latter. Like, you go from, hey, this is a surprisingly good team to start the year or whatever. Like, they're trying to surprise people. And then eventually it's just what it is. Right.
Right.
And we said that last week too, right? Like, as you start to count the games, as it gets closer to halfway, now last week, and remember what last week started as when we were talking about this. It started as, you got 6 games until Christmas.
Right.
So if you've got 6 games, 2 weeks, let's check back in, right?
Yeah.
Let's check back in when this happens.
We're halfway through that, and they've, like I said, they've gotten 5 out of 6 points.
Not only are we...
Oh, by the way, with the backup goalie.
Yeah, we'll get to him.
Well, yeah, and Sam Ersson will have his minute in this show. Don't you worry.
I think he gets more than a minute at this point. Absolutely. The interesting part about and I don't want to jump too far ahead and go right to next week already, but they play 3 teams over the course of the next week that they've already seen literally on the points streak. Not even like, hey, we've seen them this year. Within the last 3 weeks.
The last recent string of success.
Right, 3 weeks since they started on this point streak. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be challenging. Let's put it this way. I look at those 3 games and I go, and the same thing still applies as last week, because this is exactly what everybody that I know that's been around that's around the team is saying also, because this is the way that the standings look. You go on a 3-game losing streak, it changes everything dramatically, potentially.
Kevin, I have some breaking news here.
What's going on?
The NHL app pushed an update this morning, and calendar view is back.
Interesting. I have not updated yet. So
I pulled up the schedule expecting to have to scroll through December because it's stupid.
Well,
the calendar app is back.
Well, that's great.
Sorry. Anyway.
No, but that's great. Now, and this is the truth, because because obviously, like, I have 2 different methods for kind of in-game keeping track of things. There's the media site that does that is top notch. No problem. And there's the app. And when you're sitting in the press box where I am, and you're not really able to dual screen it too much because you're trying to look at a couple different things. I mean, let's put it this way. If I was even just splitting 2 tabs on my monitor, just on my laptop, it's probably what I'm writing and social, not, hey, I want a stat sheet up at all times. If I'm going to do that, I've got a phone for that. I even bring along a stand that I sit my phone on to have it like as an extra view.
Yeah, absolutely.
The app does not update fast.
No, it does not, and often updates incorrectly and out of order. Like when the Leafs scored 5 goals the other night to come back against, who was that, Columbus?
Right. Yes,
it was completely out of order. The 5-4 goal was listed before the 5-3 goal.
Or it'll show the score update and not tell you who scored for another 5 minutes. It's pretty ridiculous. And this is like what I'm saying is, I'll level with them, like with the Flyers game on Saturday. It starts and it's Sean Couturier who scored the first goal, because everybody in the building thought that at first, and then the replay showed it was not. It was it was
was
Cam
Cam
York's
yeah.
goal, and it hit JT Comp for stick, and that's why. So it takes a second for that to update, but I get that. That happens sometimes. A deflection, you're not sure who got it.
It takes 10 minutes to get on the app in the first place is pretty
Right.
frustrating.
I just wish it would update faster. So maybe if that's part of the update or a future update as well, in addition to the calendar view, that would be lovely.
Maybe.
I would appreciate that greatly.
Yeah.
I may actually have to literally live in show update that now you just told me that, because I did, obviously I haven't
It's
done
enormous.
that
It's huge, because I can look back and see this week, and
I'm not gonna update the multiple other things that could be updated on here. I literally just updated that just to do it.
But yeah, let's talk about that Tuesday game, right? I'm looking at this schedule and I see the Tuesday game in Nashville. It's the end of the dad's trip. It's the end of that little mini, central/west type of vibe. You played Arizona, you played Colorado, you play Nashville. You get a point out of Nashville.
So there's two different things to look at in this game.
Yeah.
Because number one is go look at the shot total and realize how much the Flyers outplayed this team.
Absolutely. The Flyers absolutely should have won that game, right? Like the deserve to win a meter.
Sure. Exactly. Based on that. Right. Now, I do want to give Nashville credit, because since then they've gone on to win two more since they beat Washington. I'm trying to remember who else they beat during the week. I'm not going insane with this, because we're here for the Flyers.
Right.
They won another game this week too. Carolina, and they rallied. I forgot all about that one. That was a game that was like 5-2 at one point, and they came back and won the game in overtime.
Yeah.
Same guy, by the way, Philip Forsberg.
It turns out he's good at scoring goals, man.
Sure. Well, he got hurt during. I still remember it too. He got badly hurt in Philly. It happened right in front of me, pretty much, and I knew the second that it happened, it was going to be something that could, I don't want to say take care of the rest of his season, but I'm like, it's going to be a while. Whatever it is, it's going to be a while. And it ended up being like the rest of the season, I think.
It was a long time. Yeah.
But they trailed Carolina 2-1, 4-2, 5-3, managed to get the game tied, won it in overtime, 6-5 final. Wild, right? Just wild kind of game. And then they go out the next night and they beat Washington 3-1. And oh, by the way, they had won before Philly too. They beat Montreal too, so they're on a 4-game winning streak. 5 of 6. That it's not point. Okay, so it's not points in 7 straight, but out of going back that far, or 8 games or whatever it is, they got points in 7 of their last 8 or something like that.
And they're climbing. And they're currently sitting in the first wild card spot in the West. Like, Nashville's a decent team.
They're sitting in the first wild card spot in the West, and they were essentially non-existent in the playoff picture 2 weeks ago.
Yep. Yeah,
it was bad. They were one of those teams that I wouldn't have had the same. Remember last week when we were getting into the week ahead from which was the games this week, and it was like I had kind of talked about after this little run, which is going to be beyond Christmas at this point. Like, they're going to play the 3 games that they have coming up, which are all going to be challenges, and then I think they come back with Vancouver.
Okay.
And it's like, okay, so include Vancouver in it, because Vancouver's top 5.
Yeah.
And then you get this list of teams that's like Seattle, Calgary. Now Edmonton's on the rise, so I don't want to make it seem like Edmonton's the team that they saw at the beginning of the year. But they also get, like, after the new year, they also get Columbus early in the year. They get Calgary again. They get Minnesota at one point in time in there. Like I think they play Pittsburgh again pretty early on. Pittsburgh's still below 20th. Like, you're going to get this list of teams that you play that are 20th or lower.
By the way, just because we're a Flyers podcast here, so we wouldn't be a Flyers fan podcast if we didn't mention the Penguins getting absolutely pumped by the Leafs on Saturday night. 7-0.
I was going to say, I saw something because it was in Toronto, right?
Yeah.
So I saw something about, how do you think Dubas and Spezza feel watching this?
And the at one point the Toronto crowd was giving him the Dubas.
They've got issues. That team's got massive issues.
You know what? They sure do. And the Flyers are, as I mentioned to you before the show here, the Flyers are currently sitting 11th in the league. I
can't even go off of that at this point. Like, I don't even pay attention.
With 37 points, and there's a glut of teams sitting above them at 38.
Right.
The Flyers are legitimately 2 points away from being a top 5 team in the league.
Well, exactly. I just go off of, you know what? Another week has come and gone, and this is still true. What I just put up on the screen.
Flyers are
still in second place.
Yep.
You know, and don't get me wrong, they lost in overtime and it flipped.
Sure.
Right away, right?
Sure. And things are still close enough. Like the Metro is super duper tight. And if you have a bad week, you're still in trouble, right? Like we talked about Nashville kind of charging. And if the Flyers do the opposite, if you lose 5 of 6, you're still in trouble. Like you're not comfortable enough to the point where you can do that. But
and I think the point also is that as we start to go through these games that happened over the course of the week, they got points, or they won a couple, they got points. You can look back at every single one of them and go, there's a way they lose all 3 games.
Oh,
absolutely. And I'm not trying to bring the vibe down from that. I'm being realistic in the sense that it's not like they dominated and it was comfortable. You know, there's moments where you're sweating it out, and it's like, so I think what, like, the point of that is, it's just that it still is on. It should still be on your mind as you go into future games. Like, it's not impossible for this to be, for one bad week. That's all it's going to take right now to change the whole course of this. So that, again, maybe it's just not pumping the brakes on expectations or anything like that, or what could be, because you're seeing what's unfold. Because I hate the way that I just worded that, because like, pump the brakes on expectations.
No, I know what you're saying.
Well, I know you do. Like, what I'm saying is that they've already exceeded expectations.
Absolutely.
By a mile.
They have far exceeded expectations. But this is not a team like the Boston Bruins, mostly of previous years. This isn't a team like the Toronto Maple Leafs. This isn't a team like the Vancouver Canucks, or the Edmonton Oilers, where you can kind of rely on your star power to dig you out of a hole.
Sure, they don't have that guy.
Right. This team is scratching and fighting and clawing for every single point that they get.
But yet the thing is, and this is maybe taking more from the Detroit game than it is any of the others, I guess, because, we're going to get into the goalie in a minute, because that
he's the big story.
Well, he's a big story, but like, sure, Carter Hart was sick this week again. We actually talked to him on Saturday after morning skate, so he was able to back up, and
he seems hopeful that they've gotten that figured out.
Something had to be figured out. He didn't want to go into detail, which is understandable. So I'm
absolutely.
Not like saying anything
and with medical stuff, we absolutely respect privacy entirely.
Sure. But bottom line was that whatever it was, because he even said he got sick 3 times in a month, basically. And it's like, and
something's going on.
Right. So they were able to try to get, hopefully they got to the bottom of it, and he'll be back relatively soon.
Yeah.
Definitely, and he admitted this part, so I'm not sharing anything that he didn't share with everybody else. Definitely lost some weight.
Yep. You could see it.
You could see it, but also, like, because I'm like, they
confirmed it. Right.
Well, he confirmed, but they also I'm sure they popped, like, because there was no video in the room when we interviewed him, but I'm sure they popped him up on the broadcast during Saturday's game, because he was there and he was back, and like, you could kind of see it pretty much right away just looking at him. Even like he thinned out a little bit in the face and things like that. Like, he definitely lost some weight. So
he'll eat some ham over Christmas.
He said he's going to try to gain it back. He prefers to.
Good family meal. He'll be all right.
Well, he did bring that part up too, by the way, that the fact that the dad's trip was this week and they stayed around for Thursday as well in Philly.
Yeah.
That having his dad in town was a comfort going through the process. Like,
of course,
that if you're going, to have to go through something and get some, and the results are involved, and you're trying to properly diagnose something to figure out why this is happening, it's good to have family around. So definitely. By the way, there's another family anecdote on a much more not going through a medical side.
Okay.
On a much more positive note that I'll bring up when we get to the other goalie, by the way, because he said something after the game about it. But so here's something I wanted to bring up when we go through this, because you're right. Like, you're talking about, like, in terms of putting him in the stratosphere of like the Vegas Ranger, Bruin, that kind of team type of thing and things like that, right?
Teams that can coast on talent. They are not that team.
Sure, they're not. They have to work hard every game. But I do want to bring this up because I started thinking about this and I went through and I'm like, let me just, as I'm browsing this list of teams, because there's a handful of teams that are in the top 10, just in the top 10 alone. Let's just start there, that they haven't played yet this year, to be able to put them next to that team and say, can they compete with them? Can they do the same thing they've done against some of these other teams? Right. Because every time we've come through the schedule, we've gone through this, right? Every time we go through another week, we sit there and we look and we go, oh, they're playing blank this week. That'll be a test where we'll see what they're made of from that. Right. And every week they've answered the call so far.
Yep. To the point where at this point we have to start reevaluating that, because most teams that they're looking to play, and now that we're almost halfway through the season, it's a pretty significant sample size. Most of the teams that they're playing are below them in the standings.
Well, right. It just comes out
they're looking down at them.
Even by the smallest of margins, but still,
right.
You're right. They're right there with them. I'm just going to read off a couple of teams that are both ahead of them or whatever. I'm just going to read off a bunch of teams and you'll be able to figure out what they have in common in a second. Okay. Vegas, Vancouver, LA, Dallas, Colorado, the Islanders, Nashville, Detroit, Carolina, New Jersey, Washington, Arizona. Okay. That grouping of teams.
Okay.
They have two things in common. One from a league standpoint and one from a Flyer standpoint. I'll give you the league standpoint to be easy with it. From a league standpoint, every one of those teams is top 20. Okay. They are not one of these bottom tier, bottom third teams.
Right.
What is the Flyer thread though? What is the Flyer connection here?
The Flyers beaten all those teams this year?
Not beaten, but gotten a point against every one of them.
Fair enough.
Do you want to know out of the rest of the top 20, by the way? So here's the teams that I didn't mention out of the top 20. The Rangers, Boston, Toronto, Winnipeg, Florida, Tampa Bay, St. Louis.
So they haven't played Florida, Winnipeg, or St. Louis yet, right?
They haven't played St. Louis. They haven't played Tampa. They haven't played Florida. They haven't played Winnipeg. They haven't played Toronto. They haven't played Boston. The only team, the only team in the top 20 that they do not have a point against that they've played against is the Rangers.
Wow.
So after a certain point, if you've done that against every team in the top 20, just down to getting a point,
and you've only played the Rangers once, for the record.
Well, right, and I get that, but you get what I'm getting at though, where it's
I know.
Like Dallas is a really good team. You played them way back before all of this recent stretch, 8-game point streak. I'll put that up on the screen too at this point. 8-game point streak. Way before that ever came to be, right? Like they played Dallas. Let's not even just do the 8-game point streak that they're currently on. They played Dallas before they had a 5-game winning streak earlier in the year. They did all of that, right? You still took them to overtime. You may not have won the game, but you took them to overtime. There's something to be said for that. And you know what? If you do, just go back to on the Rangers real quick. If you do end up staying around in the playoff race,
your Rangers games are super duper important, right? You play them February 24th, right before the trade deadline. Then you play them March 26th and April 11th, right at the end of the regular season. 2 games in about 2 weeks.
So that's going to be fascinating, by the way, because
if those are points that the Flyers are fighting for playoff purposes, those are some fun hockey games.
Sure, but that's going to be an interesting conversation to have when, because you even brought it up. They play in February, right?
Yeah.
And that's still pre-deadline. So
where's the team at that point? Are they selling? Are they buying? Are they standing pat?
Well, I still don't see them buying. That's the point.
I could see them making small value adds, nothing crazy, but a Matthew Joseph from Ottawa type of thing. Guys who are
you're saying
get a little term on,
but you're saying a this for that, where they might get a little something more and take a player on top of it that doesn't hurt you.
Small hockey deals, or like I said, you grab a guy who's young that you might be able to hold on to that might have some value. Even if you do end up rebuilding.
The problem with that is it depends on who you're willing to move in the first place.
I think,
at this point, nobody big's moving. I'll tell you that right now.
I don't want to say
the way it's going. Right, nobody big is moving. You're not dangling. I'm sorry. Guess what? You're not dangling. Probably not dangling Scott Lawton at this point. Even though he's not even the best player, but if you're not even going that far, you're not dangling Travis Konechny.
I'm not even really looking terribly at the roster. Maybe a roster player goes like just slot for slot, but I'm
like a Nick Seeler, for example.
Right. But I'm looking at it more as you're spending a little bit, not a ton, not Oliver Bonk, not Denver Barkey, not Cutter Gauthier, but one of your kind of mid-level prospects just to make a little upgrade to, for example, a Nick Seeler. I could see something like that. I'm not
maybe, and you know what? You've got so much time between now and then that again, right now their tune hasn't changed. They're still saying all of the same things they were, that they're not gonna deviate from the plan and all the stuff like that. And it's not that I don't buy it. I see a lot of people out there like nationally who are like, I don't know if you saw this. The Athletic had something recently that had to do with like, I guess it was among their writers, a voting system that was like, who's the surprise team, who's going to win they did it for award races.
Right.
And they literally showed it month to month. Like in October, it was this, then November, it was this, then December, it's this. And, like for surprise playoff team, the Flyers did modestly well, but there was a lot of people that in that whole thing that were saying, yeah, and the but was, if they don't change the plan, like eventually it's going to come crashing down to earth, and B, it's because they're not trying to upgrade, then it's almost possible that they sell at the deadline regardless,
right?
To stick with the plan, and then almost essentially self-sabotage the run.
Just kind of free
because
roll.
They know long term it's better to do this. And maybe in December that's still a possibility. I think if you're in February and they're still doing this, I think that they don't add and they don't buy, but they do owe it to the guys who are there to say go for it.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Like, I don't need you to go out and spend first round picks and top tier prospects.
Right.
I don't,
and
that's
won't.
what the rebuild is about. Right. And good. And I trust Danny Briere, and I trust this management group. I trust Keith Jones, everybody in that front office. I'm pretty trustworthy of the group right now.
Sure.
But if you sell your Nick Sealers, if you sell you cut off all the fat around your roster and trade as much as you possibly can at the deadline, you send a message to that room, and the guys who are going to be there through the rebuild, right? Like your Bobby Brinks, your Joel Farabees, your Cam Yorks, your Carter Harts, those guys think you don't believe in them. And sometimes you can lose players by doing that.
I'm sure that's possible.
Especially if you're sitting in a playoff spot. If they've got you sitting in a playoff spot after 50 games, even if it's a wild card, even if you're just holding on. If you're sitting in a wild card after 55 games, you owe it to those guys to give them a shot.
Sure. And I think that there's an element where having 2x players in those spots comes into play because they know how they feel.
Absolutely.
So that's why I sit there, I'm like, you want me to believe, and that's why I said I believe that Danny Briere is not trying to buy at the deadline if it comes to that, because I think that they know what needs to happen. And they know that they need to slow play this and get, if you can get a few extra picks and turn it into something like at the end of the day, we raved for years and years and years until they finally won, and then they won back-to-back Stanley Cups, no less. But we raved about the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I think there's a connection already here as it is, because the general manager who built most of that team was in town on Saturday with Detroit now, trying to execute the Yzer plan after Tampa Bay did.
Successfully, very successfully.
Sure. But you don't do that. Like, Tampa Bay didn't just do that because Steven Stamkos was a first overall pick and Victor Hedman was a second overall pick.
Right.
They did it because, you find Braden Point in the third round, or Nikita Kucherov in the second.
You go get Brandon Hagel from Chicago. You make they made such incredible moves. Yzerman did such incredible stuff.
Right, but it's even beyond the acquisitions. I'm saying
you ended up drafting and developing.
Well, because you ended up with star players, legitimate star players. Like Kucherov's a Hart nominee.
Oh yeah,
can win a Hart trophy. Like he's in that running, right? Like he's
in the Rocket conversation every year too.
But he wasn't first overall.
No.
So it's not like they had to lose badly to get that guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, yeah, did they, were they one of the worst teams in the league and ended up with Stamkos? Yes. Were they one of the worst teams in the league and ended up with Hedman? Yes.
Wasn't Braden Point a 3rd-round pick?
Exactly. That's why, I just I said, and Kucherov was a
50
second
goal scorer last year.
Kucherov was a second. They had for years, not anymore, obviously, but for years they had Andre Palat. Andre Palat was a 7th.
Yep.
Like sometimes you gotta get, hit in different spots and show that you're talented at drafting or developing or acquiring players, because that's how you build the whole thing out. So that's why I don't think it matters. Like, sure, you want to stick to the plan and not buy so that you trade away things that help you keep this moving forward, because regardless of whether they finish wherever, make the playoffs, miss the playoffs barely, and I'm not using this word like they're going to do this, but tank to a spot where, because a long losing streak sinks you to 20th,
right?
Regardless of what it is, they have 2 first-round picks next year, and I don't think that's not going to change. They don't seem like they're interested in doing anything, and naturally so. They shouldn't be, right?
Whose is the others? It's Florida?
Yes. Now, Florida's right up there, too. Now, so you might be picking twice in, the 20s.
Right. I was going to say,
but
here's the right deal makes sense, I could see using that pick, but the team would have to be good. Like, the team would have to be in a position to do some stuff. And quite frankly, with the goaltending they've gotten, I could see this team convincing me to spend one of your 2 first-round picks.
Right. And and here's the other part of it too. So this gets really interesting, because I just looked it up, by the way. They have 2 second-round picks technically. They got one of them has a condition. So they
got the compensatory pick for Jay O'Brien, right?
They did, and that's the one that's going to hold no matter what.
Right.
They traded away their own second-round pick, and they have Columbus's second-round pick potentially, because the condition is, after the first round of the draft is over, Columbus then decides whether they are sending this year's second or next year's second. I think they're sending next year's, because at this rate, they're going to
be 33.
Right. It's going to be like 33 or 34.
Right.
Potentially. So, not 33, because 33 would mean they pick first. So let's be generous and say 35, 36. It's going to be in the 30s. You know what I mean? And at that point in time, do you but what if they do decide it based on the draft class? It's right. Even if there's guys at the top of the draft that you can get excited about, it's not last year's draft class.
Right. Well, and for what it's worth, Danny Brière's had 1 draft, and so far his 3rd-round pick is looking pretty decent. Denver Barkey's tearing it up for the London Knights. Now, will that translate to the NHL? Who knows? But so far, I mean, Denver Barkey, I have it pulled up here. Denver Barkey has 44 points in 29 games.
Right. And didn't make the World Junior roster.
Right. Which, honestly, probably a good thing, because he is going to be motivated. He gets extra time with his team, and he's motivated.
I know that he immediately went back from the World Junior camp after getting cut, not making the team, which, I know that Canada's trying to lure an NHL level player. Zach Benson's the one that comes up the most, but they're trying to lure one of those guys to be another forward on the roster. Because they selected 12 technically, so they have room for one more. Really, realistically speaking, it's kind
of a shame Chicago won't let Bedard go.
You know why, though?
I know, because he's scoring at a 35 goal pace in the NHL.
Well, but that was the conversation with Fantilli.
That's fair.
Could they let Fantilli go?
They probably should. Honestly.
They probably should. Right.
We talked about it a little bit on, I think it was last week's show, but he's probably winning you some games.
Well, no. Now at this point, because that whole situation, not Fantilli specifically, but Columbus is a mess.
No, I know. But while you were,
I'm saying
games,
Saturday night's games are going on, and Columbus was playing the Devils, and they were losing again. And they lost 6-3. At one point in time, I see it come across. Fantilli's been moved to the wing, and he's playing on the 4th line.
Oy vey.
And literally, you're seeing all these people going, what are we doing here?
Right. What's the point?
What are you trying to accomplish by, doing this or whatever.
This season might cost Jarmo Kekalainen his job. It might finally be time.
And if it does, then Pascal Vincent might be gone too, because if someone's going to come in and pick their own coach.
Pascal Vincent wasn't he like Jarmo Kekalainen didn't even pick Pascal Vincent right now. The circumstances picked Pascal Vincent.
Sure,
Jarmo Kekalainen picked Mike Babcock for some reason in 2023.
Well, that was what we were like. There was a discussion too, because obviously that's a big NHL wide story this week was Craig Berube.
Yes.
So
former Flyers legend.
Getting fired by the St. Louis Blues. And it's not, not that this is typically that time. We've seen it. This is typically that time of year. It's not a short
firing time.
but it's not a short list at this point already, because if technically, if you want to count Babcock as one of the firings of the year,
yeah, absolutely,
then it's 4 already.
I know.
And
Crazy.
And it's not like the talk of that is slowing down, because there's a lot of talk about DJ Smith in Ottawa.
There's a lot of talk about Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh.
Well, Sullivan, they keep telling you, is safe though.
Yeah, but they do. When Jay Woodcroft hops on a jet to Pittsburgh, let me know.
I hear you.
Because that's 100%. That he is the perfect coach for that team where they're at right now.
You also have. I know that there's some there's not like rumblings that something's gonna happen, but there's definitely heat in Buffalo.
Okay.
The stove has been turned up a little bit there too, in terms of how things are going there. So like the bottom line, the point I'm making is that might not be the last one you hear about.
Oh no. By the way, on a similar note, is John Tortorella the Jack Adams favorite?
He's got to be in the conversation at the moment.
To be in the conversation. He has to be.
I'm going to tell you right now, I saw the other day that I think on FanDuel, he's like 5th best odds.
Did you consider it?
Well, I'm not as much of the betting type.
Okay.
But
so it's pretty low, like +400 or 500 type
No, it's like a great, honestly, it was a value I would like if I would like.
If you were a betting man.
Well, but if I'm seeing what's going on and willing to take a chance on it being sustained, because I think that's also part of the problem is like we know how that award is, right? It's so much like I know where you're going with it, because yes, it's the you weren't supposed to make it and you did award,
right? Can you describe the Philadelphia Flyers season any better than that?
But I think there's skeptics again to when the deadline hits, do they just,
what do they do?
Again, like I said, do they almost self-sabotage the possibility of making the playoffs, which really probably would cement the idea that he's a candidate?
Right.
The odds that I saw were +1,200.
Oh, okay. I might
have changed with another win.
Yeah, not very much. I will check my current betting app of choice.
Let's put it this way. I hear what you're saying about that. I'm going to tell you right off the bat, no matter what happens, he's going to have a tough time against Rick Tocchet.
Fair.
Because
absolutely valid.
That is definitely looking promising for Vancouver in terms of making the playoffs. Not just making the playoffs, but shattering the expectation there.
See, but they have that superstar talent that the Flyers don't.
You're going to go off because they have Besser and they have
Quinn
Patterson and Hughes, and
the Flyers don't have.
Well, I started up front. That's why.
Right. The Flyers don't have a single player as good as Elias Pettersson. And I say that respectfully to Sean Couturier, Travis Konechny, Joel Farabee, etc.
Well, and they don't have a defenseman
as good as Quinn Hughes. All due respect to Travis Sanheim, and the season he's been having makes me question that. But I will stand firm that Quinn Hughes has been a little more consistent over the course of his career. But
this is like a turnaround for Sanheim. That's why.
Oh, absolutely.
Like Hughes has done things that make you think, like when the points come, when everything really clicks, Like people are having, I'm sure people are having a hard time this season in particular, trying to figure out which brother's the better player.
Also, big thumbs down boo to ESPN Bet for not having Jack Adams trophy voting. Okay.
Anyway, I want to bring, I'm glad you brought up Travis Sanheim for a second in that though, because that was what made the Detroit game so impressive to me was everything's fine up until warm-ups when you realize he's not playing because he's sick now, and they tell you that, and it's like, that's not the same. Like, I'm not trying to sit here and say that Carter Hart being sick isn't like more than just an inconvenience to like your team or whatever.
Right.
But
with the way Sam Erson's been playing,
right,
you can like, tolerate that.
Well, and you've seen it happen before. So when it happens, it's like, okay, Erson's getting the start, and he just continues to do what he's doing. You take Sanheim off of the top pairing because he can't play, and it's like, okay, somebody's got to get elevated. Cam York's going to play more minutes. You're going to have to lean on that group, the Sealer Walker pairing. Mark Stahl's going to play with Igor Zamula. Zamula's had some inconsistencies. Stahl is certainly slower and has his moments.
Just the phrase "Mark Stahl's going to play" just sends shivers.
Well, I was surprised that originally he wasn't going to play against Detroit, where he played for a while. So
that's fair.
I thought
it was a big reunion vibes game. By the way, Shane Gostisbehere returns, Alex Lyon returns,
then got hurt. But
yeah, unfortunate to see. I hope he's okay.
I mean, it was a good goaltending game all around, honestly.
Oh, I mean any game that ends 1-0, you're probably looking at some good
I mean, well, I think what I'm trying to get at is that I hardly expected 1-0 walking into the building that night.
Especially if you tell them that one of the goalies is going to get hurt.
Sure.
You're going to go to a cold backup. Like, yeah, it was a fantastic performance out of both goaltending, squads.
But it's amazing to me how, like, again, this was kind of the theme from the end of the game. It's a different way to win a game again. Like,
and they're finding ways.
You want the definition of finding a way, just watch the last 2 minutes.
Yep.
I mean, like, they're just hanging on at that point.
Sequence.
Sure.
If you told me, if you just clip that last 2 minutes and show me that as an isolated clip, tell me those players aren't playing that like it's a playoff game. Just with the intensity and the desire and the absolute passion.
Do you remember Carter Hart's second start against Nashville?
Vaguely.
In his rookie year, where
I remember his first start.
Well, sure, but they were blocking shots left and right.
The Renaissance painting.
Yes.
Three flyers laying down in front of an open net. Right. Yep, absolutely.
That's what the end of the Detroit game felt like a little bit.
Absolutely did. Yep.
And Gostisbehere in particular got really
2 or 3 good looks.
Really 3 shot attempts. The first one he whiffed on. No, the first one he gets.
Yeah.
It gets through. And
that was a ghost. That was the ghost clap bomb. He had
and the way
he stick straight to the
way
ceiling.
He's winding up. I honestly, for a second, I thought, oh boy,
I thought it was going bar down.
I
thought it was going bar down.
Because
Shane Gostisbehere has been hitting that shot in the Wells Fargo Center for 10
we've
years.
Seen it, right? That's exactly
going back to Union in the Frozen Four. He's been hitting that shot for 10 years.
Sure, absolutely. I have to say, and we're gonna for real at this point. I'm moving to Sam Ersson in a second from this, but I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about from that Detroit game in particular. York and Ristolainen were outstanding,
spectacular.
I mean, that was easily their best game. Like, not just the fact they were playing together, but like individually, I think it's the best game I've seen both of them play.
Yep. And by the way, something I just want to mention here, the word has kind of come up a couple times here. I'm gonna hit you with a little playoffs.
Yeah.
But do you want to play against Rasmus Ristolainen in the playoffs?
Not if he's doing what he did against Detroit.
Do you want to play against Garnet Hathaway in the playoffs? Do you want to play against Nick Delorier in the playoffs? And I know they won't play much. Don't get me wrong.
From a physicality standpoint, I hear what you're saying.
You talk about clearing space. Tell me those guys can't clear some space.
Well, sure. The funny part is like those 2 guys are probably the 2 that I look at among the forward group. Like Delorier obviously has the partial no move or the no move. I know we don't need to revisit it again. I know.
Tough move out of Chuck
Fletcher. And Hathaway wasn't just a 1-year contract. He was a 2-year. So it's a little bit different,
which I'm thrilled with.
But it's a little different to move those guys. Like, even like, again, all the guys that are 1-year deals or were trial runs, like, do you think they're looking to actively trade Ryan Poehling today?
Absolutely not.
Right? Probably not, because they bumped him up, for goodness sake. Like,
I as soon as he is eligible in January, I would like to see him extended.
I don't know if they're going to go that far because
there's no reason to. No.
Well, because here's the other thing. There's no reason to do anything right away. You have to factor in anybody who makes the team again, in the future. You have to be prepared for that. I just don't know right now. Like if as it is constructed, what do you change? They've been winning. Like
Right.
what do you change?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Like that's it, and that's just the way that it goes. Like you're sitting there watching them play these games, the way that they play, they continue to do the same things that keep them in games. And as it keeps going, time is ticking away in that third period, and supposedly anyway. Lou Nolan had to tell you every minute that it was ticking away because they only spent however much money on a scoreboard that's bigger than most in the NHL, and it doesn't work some nights.
Yeah.
Try both home games this week. Because it worked throughout the Washington game until the shootout, when apparently all of a sudden lights go out.
I bet they'll tell you that it's because the Wells Fargo Center has been going under construction. The problem is it's like the 95 construction. It's been happening for 6 years at this point. At what point is that just what you are? We talk about this Flyers team.
But either way, as time's ticking down in the third period of that game, you're realizing, like, sure, maybe up until the flurry of chances that Detroit had in the final 2 minutes, you're going,
right,
they're not doing anything to prevent winning this game.
No,
they're gonna win.
Yep.
That's the thing, right? Like, and oh, by the way, at the same time that's going on, go look at the rest of the scores from Saturday. And
there was some wild hockey games.
But in terms of, like, for a little while, you were in the third period leading 1-0. The Rangers were losing 1-0 to Boston. They came back and won the game 2-1 in overtime. But the Rangers were losing 1-0. The Islanders were losing to Montreal. The Penguins were losing to Toronto. The Capitals were losing to Nashville. And all of a sudden, you're looking around, you're going, how many other teams how many other teams in the division are going to lose?
Yep.
Right.
We're the only team in the division getting points tonight.
Potentially. And I mean, the Islanders made it interesting.
Sure. And the Rangers won.
And the Devils beat Columbus, which it doesn't sound like as much of an accomplishment. Right. I mean, but it's interesting. And that's what made, again, forget the game they play. Getting a point in Nashville is fine. Winning the game against Detroit is fine. Like, there's nothing, it's the divisional games that have the biggest implications when you want, whatever, when it comes to playoffs, right?
Right.
So you needed that game against Washington if you wanted to continue to keep that narrative going.
For sure.
And and you almost are in a position to lose the game on a fluke. A total fluke. The guy breaks a stick and it goes right to Dylan Strome. Open net, score, right?
Yep.
Okay. You rally back for a second time. And then now I'm bringing Sam Ersson into this because I'm good.
Absolutely.
Because here's the thing. When did they get good at shootouts?
When Sam Ersson hit the net.
Apparently 3-0 in shootouts.
Listen, if they can't score, you can't lose.
I'm also convinced, based on some of the shootouts that the 3 shootouts that they've had, by the way, when Sean Couturier wasn't playing, did he just sit at home and think up ways that he could score in the shootout? Because he's been pretty money this year.
Sean Couturier definitely played a lot of cello last year. Absolutely.
I don't know about that, but he definitely was taking some ideas, at least, because he's been really good in the shootout. Bobby Brink had to wait out the move there.
Nasty.
By the way, that's Sam Ersson wants partial credit for that. He said after the game, because apparently he's pulled that move that Charlie Lindgren tried.
Okay.
Ersson's pulled that move in practice, so apparently there's a tell that a goalie's going to try that.
A goalie's about to fly at you,
and Brink picked up on it, made the move, and got and then basically glided it to the net, Mike Richards style.
Yep.
To just make it easy.
Oh, what a reference. Oh, I just got hit with the best little fuzzy burst of nostalgia. Oh, that was great. Sorry, I was at that game and it was amazing.
But and then, and Ersson, to this point in the shootout, by the way, Ersson hasn't been scored on except for by one person. And by the way, it's possibly the greatest shootout performer ever.
Crazy.
TJ Oshie, okay, fine. You get scored on by TJ Oshie. I don't think that
no.
You're not alone.
That's almost a badge of honor. Like,
right, like you're not alone.
To the side and let him put it in.
American
hero TJ Oshie.
But it's incredible. So he has that game, wins another shootout. By the way, also in a completely unexpected start.
Oh yeah,
like or non-planned anyway. Like it wasn't planned that he was going to start that game.
And he's had to do that several times this year.
Like here's what I mean by that. The start in Nashville was completely planned. He was going to start that game pretty much no matter what. He wasn't supposed to start against Washington or essentially Detroit, but the Washington game, at least, it creeps up on you because that's when it's, oh, Carter's sick. He's not going to play. Because it was a continuation of Carter's sick, it's easier to go to Ersson at that point and say, you're getting Saturday now because we already know this is a thing.
Right.
You wake up on Thursday morning, you don't know you're starting that game, and then all of a sudden it's, nope, he's sick. You're starting. You know, usually you can potentially tell the goalie the night before.
Yeah,
absolutely. Prep, it's your
let
game.
Let him do his game day.
They knew they knew on Friday Ersson was going Saturday against Detroit.
Yeah, and that's good for him.
They didn't know on Wednesday. On Wednesday, everybody assumed it was Carter Hart getting a start against Washington.
Right.
It turned out to be Ersson. And then by the way, to follow up the third shootout win of the year, with a 33 save shutout, which, oh, by the way, is his second this year.
Yep. Second in his last 5 games.
I have to go look, by the way, to see what his numbers looked like season-wise after the game was over. I know his goals against coming in was solid. His save percentage was not because of those first couple of games.
As it sits right now, he's got a 257 goals against and an 897 save.
So it nearly bumped him up from, like, I think he was at 885 coming into the game.
Yeah.
So it nearly bumped him to 900.
Yeah.
Right. So he went up dramatically because like what I'm getting at is that, and the Nashville game didn't help from a save percentage standpoint because he only saw 22 shots in the game.
Right.
And gave up 3 goals and certainly wanted the last one.
He's also won 7 of his last 8 starts.
If you take out the first 3 appearances he made, which also include, by the way, he came in for Hart when Hart got hurt against Buffalo.
Yes. Yeah.
And that game ultimately ended up tied somewhere in the picture.
So he took the loss.
So he took the loss and only faced 9 shots and gave up 2 goals.
Yeah, it's unfortunate for the save percentage.
Well, in general, because by that point he'd had, gave up 5 on 25 against Dallas in that overtime game.
Yeah.
Again, I still stand by the fact that when that Anaheim game that he got to start again, it was the first one, because he started both. The first one,
right,
where he's in goal for all 7 goals that they scored, and it was out of hand at 4-0. He should have been out of the game at 4-0.
I agree, but
and they let it ride in his save percentage, because for a little while his save percentage was .750.
I know, and the good news is that it was really, honestly, his only terrible performance of the season so far.
Right.
And if you only have one, it'll come out in the wash over a long season.
But since that game, to your point, like, yes, he's won 7 of his 6 of his last 7 starts. He's won 7 of his last 9. Do you know since the relief loss against Buffalo, do you know who the only team he's lost to in regulation is at this point?
The San Jose Sharks. The San Jose Sharks, who, by the way, have surfaced as an actual legitimate hockey team. They're not good, don't get me wrong, but they are no longer.
But they're not a minor league team anymore.
Holy smokes. They're still 9-18-3, but they've climbed up to 30th in the league.
I was going to say, they're not the worst team in the league anymore, so that matters.
No, the team with the best odds for Macklin Celebrini is currently the Chicago Blackhawks.
Of course it is.
They're really trying to do that Oilers 2008-2014 thing where they just get all the first overall picks.
Where you follow up,
and then you miss the playoffs for 4 more years.
So instead of after getting the kid named Connor, you're trying to get his his accomplice, basically.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anyway, beyond
honestly, I expected to be talking about Macklin Celebrini from a Flyers perspective because we got the 5th best odds of getting them.
Right.
And then here we are, just like, Macklin who?
But and here's the thing, and I've seen some people who are going, who all these people who said they were going to be bottom 5, because I said that too, right? I said
we all did
at the beginning of the year. People can be wrong about things. Like, seriously.
Right.
I want to know who expected, seriously. Like,
Zero people.
Right. Who expected that you were getting what you're getting out of certain guys that give you the chance to win on certain nights?
Nobody
Do
wants us to win.
you know the only thing that I'm not surprised about, genuinely speaking? That their goaltending's been decent.
Absolutely.
It's about it, honestly. Like, the defensive play around it, I thought was going to make the goaltending worse.
I thought it was going to be atrocious. And I have
and then their forward play, they're not scoring a ton. Like don't get me wrong, they're not scoring a ton. In fact, they've kind of gone back.
But they're back checking and playing well defensively, which is
of
fine.
course they are. I mean, like, and that's the name of the game when you're coached by John Tortorella.
I was going to say John Tortorella. We talked about Rick Tocchet being the lead for the Jack Adams, and I know we're kind of circling back around on this, but how do you not look at John Tortorella and say, okay, he's getting very similar results with just less talent? Like,
sure,
and I'm not belittling the guys on the roster. Obviously, the Flyers have some talent. There's a lot of talented players. The kids are playing well, but you don't have the talent that the Vancouver Canucks have.
Right.
You just don't.
Right.
So how do you look at the job that Rick Tocchet's doing, which has been fantastic, don't get me wrong, and the work that John Tortorella has been doing, which is also fantastic, and just not look at John Tortorella a little bit more favorably here? Like, we're getting blood from an absolute stone.
Right. Well, I'm trying to look at the teams, like, obviously you're trying to look at the teams that may qualify for this, like who's, like we always say, it's the team that you didn't expect to be as good as they are.
You were supposed to suck. Yeah.
I don't know if Vancouver was supposed to suck.
They did last year.
No. I know. But I know. But there were people who thought they could, because again, you had Pettersson, Besser, Hughes. You had players.
Right.
I just, nobody had them top 5 though. So it's like, you know what I mean? Like that's the difference. They're top 5. As much as there's things that aren't sustainable about what they're doing, they're making it so. Like I can say the same thing about the Flyers.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not sustainable. It doesn't feel sustainable, and yet they're sustaining it.
Right.
So at some point in time, you stop worrying, you stop talking like that, because it just becomes what it is, right?
It's just who you are.
I think that if you're gonna go into a Jack Adams conversation, like Tocchet's definitely probably the front runner of that.
I agree.
I think Jim Montgomery deserves some consideration again, because again, you take away Bergeron and Krejci, and everybody thought they were gonna fall off the cliff. They're 3rd in the league.
Crazy.
So I don't know about that. I wonder if there's conversation for somebody like Andrew Brunette in Nashville.
Okay.
Because again, they're 13th in the league. They started off poorly, but I wonder if there's conversation for that. Trying to think if there's anybody else who you could consider. I mean, depending on what happens with Washington too, I think you could go that direction as well. Spencer Carberry is doing a job with that team as well.
And then the President's Trophy team, their coach always ends up kind of in the conversation. So at this point, that would be Vegas, but who knows? It could also end up being the Rangers.
But how do you sit there and say that the defending Stanley Cup champion shouldn't be up? You know what I mean? Like, I get it.
Right.
Like, I mean, at this point, is Laviolette going to get some consideration with the Rangers again because of the first year effect? Like,
everyone in the top 3, your coach is automatically at least in the conversation.
I know, but I feel like it's a unique situation because, like, the top 3 right now is Rangers first year head coach, with them anyway, and Boston. You literally took away a first ballot Hall of Famer and made it seem like, down the middle, they're going to be thinner. It's like, it's going to be totally different because Bergeron's not there, and haven't missed a beat.
No, they pulled Pavel Zacha out of absolutely nowhere.
Charlie Coyle, looking like, he belongs in the top 6. Like, a guy who played 3rd line forever.
His entire career. He was
looking like he belongs,
Yep.
And I'm not saying I'm shocked by it. It's just, you know what I mean? It's like, they don't miss a beat.
Yep.
They didn't miss a beat about it. But you've got this whole, again, I understand where you're coming from, because yes, and it even goes to the conversation we had last week with the Flyers, where it was like, you added 2 more wins to the total. We were having that conversation. We said they got to 15 wins. They're halfway now they're more than that. They're past halfway to their win total from a year ago, and it's been 30 games.
And it's still pre-Christmas.
Remember what I told you a couple weeks ago? I feel like I don't remember if I told you this during the 5-game winning streak or somewhere in the last handful of weeks. But at one point in time, like we were discussing the idea, not necessarily of like where the win total was going, that they were halfway there yet or whatever, but I remember saying something along the lines of the way that they have to play and the way they know they have to play and the fact that nobody's giving it was probably after, you know what it was? It was probably after, maybe it was last week then, because I think it was after the Colorado game that Carter Hart said, nobody wants us to win.
Yeah.
And because of that, because players start to think nobody wants us to win, let's go win.
Yep.
I said something along the lines of, they could screw around and win 35 games.
Oh, yeah.
You know what it's going to start to turn into?
50?
No, it's not going to be based off a win total. Because the idea was they might win 35 games, and it's not going to be the draft position that you want, but it doesn't mean that, like, you're going to look back and go, you know what? I know what game it was now.
Okay.
Because it was after we established, based on a certain John Tortorella quote, that the team has an identity.
Team's got balls.
So we established that the team has an identity.
Yeah.
And because they have an identity, that's already, like, truthfully, that's already makes it a successful season. It already makes it successful because of the fact that you've established. It's
all about figure out who you are, and
right,
it seems
because
like
you've already established that identity, and the culture feels like it's back. I brought up because obviously Snow the goalie broadcasts from the games. They're over near the sports book in the balcony level.
Sure.
And earlier this week, I think the Capitals game, they had from Crossing Broad, because it's obviously it's a Crossing Broad show. Right. They had Kevin Kincaid from Crossing Broad as their guest in pregame, because Chris Therrien's not doing pregames on Snow the goalie because he's doing them on the Fanatic.
Okay.
And then he goes over, does intermissions in postgame with Snow the goalie.
Right.
Kevin Kincaid posted on X or whatever after the game was over that the line to go and shake hands with Keith Jones, you would have sworn he was the Pope, because Keith Jones walks around and people are following along. And it's created such a vibe with the way the new era is being approached because of whatever. And I got to follow it up with, because the pictures were all over social media after the game on Saturday. Danny Briere is down in the room, walking around to every player. Keith Jones is down in the room, walking around to every player. Dan Hilferty.
I don't expect that to change.
And Dan Hilferty is there again and goes downstairs and is shaking hands with everybody after a 1-0 win, points in 8 straight. Does that sound familiar at all?
It sounds like the vibes are high.
Well, the vibes are high, but does that sound familiar at all? Does that not sound like Mr. Snyder's Flyers?
Yeah.
You know,
it does.
Hey, good job tonight. I'm going down to acknowledge every player in that room as your ownership representation.
And that is one of the reasons that over the summer and even into last spring when he came in, that I was so excited about Dan Hilferty, because his bio was basically lives in Ocean City, is a Flyers fan. And that, for me, that's enough. Because you
can already tell when you're there, because of how present he's been.
Absolutely.
That he gets it. And know he gets it. And
when I was speaking earlier in the show about trusting this management group, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about, because I trust that they know what the fans want. They know how to deliver a good winning hockey product.
Right.
Eventually, of course, this season is a little bit of a blip in the radar.
This season's go along for the ride.
This is an anomaly. It's crazy.
Right. Because it's starting to. I saw this comparison too. I'm trying to remember. Might have been Charlie O'Connor who had something like this in there or whatever. But it starts to pass off. You know, it starts to pass off 2019-20 vibes a little bit.
Right. And
like, remember when we were doing the shows and every week we came on, we're like, this is crazy.
Yeah.
They're
the best.
They're just one of the best.
The hottest team in the league heading into the COVID shutdown. And I know we've talked about that a lot in the 3 years since that. But they were the best team in the league heading into the COVID shutout.
But what else? Yeah. But what else has happened?
If you think about it, how much has changed? Like, a lot of your roster, not all of it, but a lot of your roster is pretty similar.
Part of it, yeah, a good part of it, sure. And you know what? Yeah, but it's changed.
Of course,
it's not the same head coach, and it's not the same management group.
It's not the same head coach. It's not the same management, and I'll say it's different leadership in the locker room as well.
Well, yeah, because sure, and I already know what you're pulling from that one. Sure, so
I'm not here to belittle and demean Claude Giroux, but the team has moved on from him and has shifted into a younger, more of the Travis Konechny. I think it's a Travis Konechny run locker room from my observations on it. And that's not in a bad way, not in like a he, rules with an iron fist. Like I just mean
no, because you can tell
that everyone gravitates to.
Well, because you can tell that there's more than just him, because obviously Lawton's got the letter, and that's the only, and Tortorella said something to this effect after the game on Saturday too, where it's like Sean Couturier is not the most vocal guy, but when he's talking on the bench, everybody's listening.
I absolutely believe that. He is your veteran presence.
And that makes it that certainly makes a difference too.
God, I want him to get a letter back on his jersey so bad because it looks so weird to see.
Do you know what's interesting though? Because everybody made a big deal out of not just no captain again, but the fact that he was going to stick with the only Lawton has a letter thing.
Right.
And is it not playing out where you see guys who you feel like can get?
I know where the letters are going to go.
Like Couturier was already like that. I get it because Couturier had one in the past, but aren't you seeing Konechny emerge as that guy? Aren't you seeing Farabee emerge as a guy who you start thinking about? Aren't you seeing Travis Sanheim emerge as one of those guys?
And even looking a little bit further down the line, obviously he's young and it's not happening anytime soon. I'll tell you right now, Bobby Brink will wear a letter in his NHL career.
I wouldn't be shocked by that. I mean, the thing about the fact of the matter is that when you pick up guys who presumably are among the best on their teams wherever you got them from, because you can do this with Cam York was one of the best players on his Michigan teams.
Every kid in the NHL was the best player on their team growing up.
Yeah, but then you start to get these kind of super teams a little bit, like college wise and
you know what I mean.
And junior wise. No, I do know what you mean. I'm saying,
but even then, they were all the best kids on their 11-year-old team.
I'm saying they've kind of had a knack lately for when they pick guys like that. Like Konechny was a captain in juniors. Farabee was among the leadership when he was playing for the national team.
Nolan Patrick was. Oh wait, never mind.
Cam York was the captain of a World Junior Championship team. Like there's an element where those guys, you see from their history that they have leadership quality in them. Leadership can be that guy. And then what you're ultimately looking to see is how do they do it in an NHL locker room? That's the other thing. I want to go back to your point though about the the way that we felt in 2019-20 for a second watching that and things like that. What else was going on with that, by the way? Because I think there's something else that's playing out a little bit. And again, I don't want to take away from the fact that there's skeptics from the fact that one bad week changes this whole thing. I get it. But what was happening as that year progressed? Citywide.
Oh, man. What did happen that year?
Well, when the shutdown happened, they were already you were already caught in between a weird spot because it was going on March and baseball hadn't started, football was over, and it was basically hockey and basketball, right? But the
Rudy Gobert touched a bunch of mics, yeah.
But the basketball team became infuriating that year because they went into a bubble and lost every game they played, and it was over.
Yeah.
And the hockey team didn't, and there was still no football, and the baseball team wasn't good at the moment.
Yep.
So they were emerging as maybe you got to pay attention to. Well, but maybe you got to pay attention.
Sure.
And
in this town, they were the only story in sports
for about a month. Yeah.
Yeah.
And in the same way, just right this minute, the baseball team is in the off season, and oh, by the way, it's been kind of uneventful. Like they haven't really made some splash that takes the attention. The football team, as good as they've been record wise, has lost 2 games in a row badly.
And have a little bit of a dip in the schedule coming, heading into the playoffs.
And I get that. And I'm not trying to take away from it, but you get what, I'm not trying to say that football isn't still going to dominate the conversation. Right. It's just for a second though, like when
it's easy for people's eyes to slide out of focus on the Eagles right now.
It's not even that's easy. It's not even that's easy for that. It's that's become a source of frustration for a couple weeks. And don't get me wrong, the basketball team is playing well, so I'm not taking that away.
The Sixers
are doing well. But what I'm getting at with that is that the Eagles lost on Sunday, let's just say, right? And then I don't remember if this was the week that the Flyers played on. Maybe it was the week the Flyers played on Monday, the Monday against Pittsburgh. And it was the Flyers restored the vibes for the week, because the Eagles got crushed against San Francisco on Sunday afternoon, late afternoon. And the Flyers came back on Monday night and won a game in overtime against the Penguins. And it's like, and swept a back-to-back and a home and all that stuff, right? And it was like, no, the Flyers will restore the vibes. And there's yes, is there a little element of sarcasm in there? Of course there is, because it's a skepticism thing.
And people still don't believe, right?
But at what point does that shift when it continues? Like seriously, I remember, this is how I broke down even the first handful of games, because at some point in time, remember the first 12 games last season too, and they were winning a few games. I think they won 7 out of the first 12, right?
Something like that, yeah.
And it's like, once it really got into, once they were on their way to losing 10 in a row again, the first 12 games went from being, to, well, that was cute, but here's reality for you.
Now let's get in the draft, right?
Right. But that's the point, right? At some point in time, we're now 30 games into the season.
Right.
At some point in time, 12 games is barely over the 10-game segments we talk about. There's not a lot of time for you to go from hey, 10-game segment, that was great. All right, now what? Reality hits.
Right.
30 games is 3 of these 10-game segments, and they've won 17 games, and they've gotten points in 20 of them.
And by the way, you're 7-1-2 in your last 10.
I believe, what's the record? 12-3-2 since the San Jose game?
Something like that.
My point in bringing that up, by the way, is the San Jose game was one of those games that people take and go,
that could have been a tipping point.
Right. But, not just a tipping point, but that's one of those games that a casual will look at and go, you lost to the worst team in the league that didn't have a win yet.
They got beat 10-0 2 games in a row.
Right. They got beat.
Right.
They gave up 20 goals in 2 games, and you scored 1 goal on them. Right. I don't need to watch this. You are exactly what I thought you were. And
the old
12-3-2 since then, beg to differ.
Right. And it's one of those things, we talk sample sizes, right?
Yeah.
10 games, probably not big enough. 20 games starting to 30 games.
Well, and by the way, so see, the 30-game round number is perfect for this too, because what's the next 10?
40. You're halfway there.
We're getting to halfway. You're 11 games from halfway. This is exactly what we talked about last week. 3 more in the books, and you're down to 11 to go until you're halfway. You're practically 10 games away from being halfway. And now you're looking at a situation where, truthfully, and we can get to this looking ahead portion, you're 3 games away from a break.
Yeah, you're 3 games away from Christmas. And
I still believe that if you run, you're still on this gauntlet a little bit, because New Jersey is where they are, or they're good, and they can be a good team.
They're probably better than where they currently are.
Sure. But. And then Nashville has come on lately. And Detroit gave you a really hard-fought game. Think about this for a minute from Detroit's perspective. Detroit gave you a hard-fought game using both goalies, no Dylan Larkin, no David Perron.
Right. Oh, yeah, you're not a great team. But you are finding ways to win hockey games.
Well, no, it's not even that. I'm saying that. Well,
that's what I'm saying. If Detroit was at full capacity, that would have been a much more difficult game.
Sure.
Right? If you have Dylan Larkin, if you have David Perron. As it sits, though, they didn't have them, and you struggled a little bit in terms of dominating them like you might have wanted to.
You still did keep for a good chunk of the game anyway. You did keep. I mean, you definitely. First of all, I think you really kept Alex DeBrincat in check, because I don't remember hearing his name much throughout the course of it. Patrick Kane, who got plenty,
is looking great.
Who got plenty of looks. I mean, they gave him a bunch of looks, and
well, they have to. No Dylan Larkin, no David Perron.
Sure, that is filling the void. I get that.
Yeah,
but. Somebody's
got to score,
right? But that was impressive.
He's starting to look pretty good.
King, yeah.
I know people talk about this hip resurfacing surgery and how difficult it is to come back from it and how old. Blah 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 blah. I'm not sure if a player this elite ever got it, and that's the thing. Is at a certain level. Patrick Kane is back, man. And I know he's not the same. And I know. Temper expectations. He's 8,000 years old. But
right now, so the thing with
a lot of guys coming back from this.
So that second Detroit game for the Flyers, This upcoming week. I mean, the second one they're going to play.
Yeah.
Could be very different. Perron is supposed to be back.
Okay.
Because Perron's 6-game suspension ends after the game on Wednesday against Winnipeg. Larkin's been back skating a little bit, and it wasn't going to be like he's eligible to come off of IR for Monday's game. They said that's probably not going to happen, but it's not impossible that with another full week, he might play.
Yeah.
And by the way, can you imagine if that's the game he comes back at because it's a home game? Just throwing it out there. That's going to be a and the Flyers are coming on. That's the back end of a back-to-back for the Flyers, the front end of a back-to-back for Detroit. So Detroit's going to be fresher. It's going to be a much bigger challenge.
Right. And like you said, these are all teams that the Flyers have seen on this current point streak. So they've gotten points against all these teams.
Now, I am curious.
Relatively recently.
Sure. Now, I am curious about what a couple days will do. I mean, let's put it this way. To go back to the Sam Ersson thing, by the way, because while we were waiting for players to, after the game in the locker room, post-game media and stuff like that, we're all huddled off to the opposite side of the room waiting for one of the three players we talked to, which was the three that we've highlighted the most from this game. It was York, it was Ristolainen, and it was Ersson. Ersson's on the opposite side because the new look locker room, by the way, the goalie stalls are on the opposite side of the room because they're actually bigger than the rest of the player ones. And there's basically like on the far side of the room from the entryway is this giant video screen looking thing that they basically can throw a Flyers logo up on, and that's what looks like your backdrop while we talk to players for the most part. I mean, we've gone over to individual lockers a couple times when they're trying to get a move on with it. But
typically they have you in the little mini press conference room.
No. I'm talking about
no. I know.
Yeah. Well, it's in the locker room. It's right by where the like whiteboards would be and things like that. So it's kind of like a smart board, almost like a smart whiteboard. It could be, but they throw a logo up on it so it looks much more professional looking.
Yeah.
That's all it is. But the goalies are on the opposite side of the room, and John Tortorella comes in after the game and told Sam Ersson how awesome of a job he did. Basically, I'll let you put what word goes in front of awesome in front of it. To keep it radio friendly. But flat out also said, enjoy the day off tomorrow.
Nice.
Like, have a great off day, because like, way to go. You've earned it this week with 3 games, 5 points out of 6, nearly won all 3.
3 good performances.
Right. But the last 2 in particular, obviously, to win another shootout and then shutout. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
pretty good.
He Tortorella really likes Ersson, by the way. I'm not saying he doesn't like Hart either. It's not like that at all, but he really likes the fact, like, and truth be told, you need 2, don't you? You need 2 goalies. He's got 2 right now.
And I was just going to say, even if Carter Hart is healthy and ready to resume being the starter, you got a back-to-back this week. You got a back-to-back next week. So Sam Ersson's going to be getting nice time.
And this is,
and you got 3 and both of them are 3 and 4s as well.
Right. Well, and this is the interesting part, by the way, because I would have, if everything would have played out the way I thought it was going to before Hart was sick, you were looking at Hart was probably not getting the Nashville game, but he was probably going to get the last 2. He was probably going to be the guy who started Washington and Detroit. And obviously he didn't.
Right.
So I thought what it lined up was that when you looked at the Flyers schedule for the upcoming week, that Hart was going to get New Jersey, Ersson was going to get Nashville, and Hart was going to get Detroit. So it lined up with who phase 2 in the previous week. Now it doesn't matter because Ersson got both.
I think that might still be how it breaks down, though.
Now I think Carter Hart gets the Nashville game to play at home.
Oh, fair enough.
They give Ersson the road game.
Okay. Do you think they give him both road games? Do you think they give him Jersey and Detroit, or do you play Carter Hart Tuesday and Thursday, New Jersey, Nashville?
I think you'd rather have Carter Hart, but I think you wait for the off day / Monday, see how he's feeling, and hopefully you can get him back into a game. But I wouldn't be shocked. And see, again, same concept. If it's both, I think Ersson gets Jersey and Detroit. So it's just a matter of how Hart's feeling for the Tuesday game.
Right.
I think that your path of action now is Carter Hart gets Nashville, Ersson gets Detroit.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
That's just my speculation, but
yeah, and we will see about that. And I think that's a pretty good place to kind of wrap it up here. Yep. We got a good week of hockey ahead of us. Our schedule is a little bit funky over the next couple of weeks because of the holiday. We won't be recording on Christmas Eve. We won't be recording on New Year's Eve. We're talking about doing a little something in there. We're not 100% sure. Our next regularly scheduled Sunday morning record, Sunday evening release show, roughly
is Sunday show of some kind.
Is scheduled for January 7th, 2024. So we will be back at that point. We'll probably be back with something at some point in between here.
Right. We're looking at like in the couple of days that lead into they're back on the West Coast for the Disney on Ice trip, basically.
Yeah.
So somewhere in the line of like during that weekday type period, like post holiday, but not
absolutely
on top of New Year's.
We'll get something in your subscription box. Check it out wherever you find your podcasts. You can find us on social media at YWT Podcast. Kevin is at Kevin_Durso. You can also find the podcast on sportstalkphilly.com. Make sure to check out everything going on over there. And it's a good time. Merry Christmas if you celebrate. Happy holidays if you don't. Kevin, Merry Christmas.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Same to you.
All right. And we will see you at some point right around the new year. Like I said, January 7th with a regularly scheduled show. So until then, happy holidays, and we'll see you.